over, man. It's game over.
Well, he really hit the shit out of that one, didn't he?
Hello and welcome back to Walkthrough and Reviews. Today we'll be looking at Skate or Die for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Developed by the once respectable company known as Electronic Arts and published by Alter Games in December of 1988. As part of this review, I want to talk about the cult classic film known as Gleaming the Cube, starring Christian Slater. Although this movie had nothing to do directly with Skate or Die, the two came out right around the same time and help illustrate the zeitgeist of 80s skateboarding culture. So, put on your Sid Vicious t-shirt, get your Vans off the wall, dust off that Nash skateboard, and let's get after it.
I'd appreciate your input.
Skateboarding has been around since the 1970s, thanks to pioneers like the Z-Boys from Dogtown. But even as the sport progressed beyond the surfers of Southern California, it wasn't widely recognized, and instead viewed as a punk fad for the juvenile counterculture.
You got any cigarettes? Regular or menthol?
The movie Back to the Future provided a small glimpse of skateboarding to the general public, but it was mostly for comic relief.
Hey, McFly, you bojo! Don't burst don't work on water! Unless you've got power!
It wasn't until the late 90s that it cemented its place in pop culture. The mass exposure was fueled by Mountain Dew, MTV, the X Games, Transworld, and 411 Video Magazine. And of course, CKY2K with Bam Margera. If you were an adolescent teen in 1999, then you or your friends probably still have some shin bruised memories from dabbling in the sport. I know I was hooked and did it all through high school. While the real thing's great, there's no doubt the biggest influence to skateboarding at that time was thanks to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater in 1999. But before the mega success of Tony Hawk, we have to look back at the video game that started it all. I'm talking about Skate or Die for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Although Skate or Die wasn't based on any movies, the skateboarding film Gleaming the Cube, starring Ice Cube, starring Christian Slater, came out the following month. So what the hell does Gleaming the Cube even mean? Well, according to Urban Dictionary, at least the PG-rated definition, it says to push yourself to dangerous new limits. And that was the general consensus from the DVD commentary from actors and skateboarders of the movie. I take it as just being in the zone. The film was produced by the short-lived company known as Gladden Entertainment Corporation, with such 80s gems like Mannequin and Weekend at Bernie's. However, due to fraud and tax evasion, the company ultimately went bankrupt in 1994, with the founder then deciding to kill himself.
Excellent!
The film hit theaters in January of 1989, which is traditionally an awful month, and it showed. With a $10 million budget, it only made less than $3 million at the box office. Fortunately, it became a cult sensation, thanks to basic cable replays and VHS sales. That's where I saw it. The movie opens up like some upbeat made-for-TV movie, but it's actually classified as a murder mystery, focusing around a brother's revenge, with plenty of skateboard scenes sprinkled throughout. The film centers around Brian Kelly, played by Christian Slater, a typical rebellious 16-year-old teenager from Orange County who just cares about skating and puts his family and school to the side. The only one he does seem to care about or have a relationship with is his brother Vin, who was adopted from Vietnam. Although they're unrelated, the two act like typical brothers, getting on each other's nerves constantly. I always found it a little odd why they made two teenage brothers, who are obviously polar opposites, have to share the same room. You'd think a rich family from Orange County would be able to afford a 3-bedroom house. I realize that the movie does this intentionally as a way to bond the two and push the exposition of the story, each dealing with their own set of dilemmas, Vin with his job and Brian with his school. Brian's trouble with school seems to be all self-inflicted due to a lack of motivation and effort. It's a pretty cliche topic. Fortunately, the movie doesn't spend too much time with it. It's more to show the relationship between the two brothers.
You did okay. If you put some effort into it, you might even pass without me.
The movie instead focuses on Vin's job as a store clerk for the Vietnamese Anti-Communist Relief Fund, which is a provider of medical supplies back to Vietnam. Like any new optimistic employee, Vin actually cares about his job, and through his motivation and due diligence, he stumbles across some discrepancies in the shipping container weights that are going back to Vietnam. Vin then goes back to his boss, who's a retired colonel from Vietnam, and he explains his discovery. However, the store owner, Colonel Tack, quickly dismisses the idea and thinks it's nothing more than a clerical error.
I'm sure this is just a clerical error.
But oh man, it's no clerical error. We later find out that Colonel Tack is in cahoots with the Westpac Supply Company and is using those shipments to sneak in illegal arms.
I have 30 SAM missiles, 1,000 M16s, and 500,000 rounds of ammunition.
Vin wasn't buying the explanation either and does some investigating of his own. Unfortunately, he gets caught snooping around the warehouse and is apprehended by the owner. Poor Vin then gets interrogated, but is completely unaware of the actual conspiracy at play. But for whatever reason, Tack's other employee, Bobby Wynn, purposely strangles him while the Colonel and Ed are outside discussing their options. When they realize he's dead, they decide to do the old Epstein trick and pass it off as a suicide. And of course it works, fooling the lead detective, Al Lucero, played by Stephen Bauer,
What the hell's going on, Lucero?
who you may recognize from Scarface. Did I mention this was a skateboarding movie? Well, that will come in a minute. After hearing about the tragedy of his brother, Brian's heartbroken and does what any other teenager would do at the time. He goes and rips on a half pipe. And this is kind of how the skateboarding is played into the movie. You get about 20 minutes of plot and exposition, and then a few minutes of skateboarding montages. The way that Brian's sitting there pushing his skateboard to convey his grief, that's damn fine acting, Christian Slater. But he's not convinced his brother committed suicide, and goes back to Al Lucero looking for answers, who quickly dismisses it and reverts back to the suicide story.
They killed my brother.
You're not listening to me.
No, you're the one who's not listening.
After getting nowhere with police, Brian decides to go back to the motel and check out the crime scene. He meets with the maid, who tells him that Epstein didn't kill himself. Upon leaving the motel, he's noticed he's being trailed by Bobby Wynn, but he doesn't know who he is at this point. Like a good juvenile delinquent, Brian's able to shake the tail, but with no other leads to go off of, Brian takes a risk and now starts trailing Bobby. He's able to sneak into his beautiful black Lincoln while Bobby's using what baby boomers refer to as a payphone. Brian hides in the back seat while Bobby takes a ride to the countryside to meet up with Colonel Tack and Ed Lawndale, the owner of the supply company. Bobby's spooked about Brian looking into the murder and asks Ed and Tack for $50,000 and a ticket to Bangkok. When they don't give him the money, a struggle ensues and Bobby gets shot with his own revolver, all in front of Brian. But at this point it makes no sense. With Bobby dead, how can Brian get his revenge? I mean, look at the tagline on the DVD. It says, "When getting even means risking it all." We're only halfway through the movie, and the guy who murdered Brian's brother also ends up murdered. So street justice is served. What's the point of a third act? Well, it's to show you the climactic skateboard ending. After the murder, Colonel Tack gets cold feet and wants to end the illegal arms shipments to Vietnam and fly back to Bangkok himself. When a police officer arrives, Ed Lawndale panics, and we witness the cheesiest 20 seconds of movie magic.
Here we go, Vin.
Go out and talk to them.
Brian's heroic actions instead got the colonel shot and gave an easy escape for the kidnapper. He then runs into an unsuspecting pedestrian who he forces into the cop car as part of their getaway. I guess cops just leave their keys in the car. Brian calls his skate rat friends, who quickly assemble at the Pizza Hut to go in hot pursuit of the stolen cop car. Most of his crew were actual skaters on the Bones Brigade, with Stacy Peralta on set acting as skating technical advisor. You had guys like Tommy Guerrero, Lance Mountain, Mike McGill, and of course, a young Tony Hawk.
I said run it!
But Tony Hawk wasn't driving the truck. He was actually one of the skateboarders bombing the hill. Right there. He may be able to bomb hills, but it's good to know that even back then, he sucked at kickflips. Because Brian's friends were real skateboarders, it was understanding that their acting would be superficial. Christian Slater, however, was a real actor that had to pull off being a believable skateboarder. He was dedicated though. In fact, 6 months prior to filming, he started to learn to skate from Tommy Guerrero. He can ride the skateboard as you see, but he doesn't look quite comfortable on it.
Hey, buddy!
Now compare that skateboarding with fellow actor Max Perlich, who you might recognize as Dooley from the movie Blow. He's got much more finesse and style while he's skateboarding, and it shows. Even though Christian Slater wasn't a strong skateboarder, the director did a great job blending the tricks from the stunt doubles. You got Mr. Darkside himself, Rodney Mullen, providing the freestyle flat ground tricks, while Mike McGill, creator of the McTwist, doing all the vert skating. A behind the scenes article for the movie was even included in the February '89 edition of Thrasher magazine. Let's fast forward to the final showdown. A Corvette gets sideswiped by the fleeing cop car. The damaged Corvette then begins chase in his automatic transmission. Brian sketches a ride, and they go racing down the freeway.
What the hell?
Alright. Still with ya. Come on, let's go.
The Bones Brigade crew shows up on the other side of a semi-truck, and we then see a stunt that probably inspired the Fast and the Furious.
Thanks for the ride.
We suspend our disbelief one more time as Brian uses the pizza truck to slingshot himself up a Jersey barrier and 20 feet over the freeway, conveniently stomping out the kidnapper. I'm sure this looked just as believable on the storyboard drawing. Well, that's Gleaming the Cube in a nutshell. If you watch this movie as a kid, I'm sure you've got a soft spot for it. But if you're over the age of 12 and watching it for the first time, I doubt you'll enjoy it. Just like Christian Slater didn't enjoy that dorky helmet. One aspect I do still appreciate is seeing skateboarding filmed in 16mm. Back then, usually your only options were grainy VHSs and high 8 tapes.
It kind of makes you wonder if the movie Gleaming the Cube inspired Tony Hawk, who became executive producer, to finance the same quality film that went into his Birdhouse movie titled The End, almost a decade later.
Now let's do some transition, drop in head first, and talk about Skate or Die. The game cover shows a radical hand plant from a skateboarder that looks like a young Steve Caballero, but I could be wrong. It's time to push the start key? Yeah, Skate or Die was originally designed for computers.
The game starts you off in a skate shop, where you're face to face with a wisecracking guy known as Rodney Recluse, who's supposed to look like Rodney Dangerfield, even more so in the Commodore 64 version.
Hey, this is my guest, Mr. Wang. No offense.
You're given a small Skate or Die icon, which you can scroll around the screen. Each time you hover over Rodney's face, he hits you with the new one-liner.
Oh, somebody stepping a duck? Hey, this steak still has marks where the jockey was hitting. Well, the last time I saw a mouth like that, it had a hook in it.
You can scroll around other parts of the screen to see what else he has to say. You got trophies, a poster.
Let's go while we're young.
Okay, what you care about is signing in, so go to the bottom left and press A.
It'll bring up a sign-up sheet where you can put your name in. This will save your scores for future plays. The game shows 8 slots. While I say it's 8 players, it's 8 players one at a time. Some events are 2 players simultaneous, but I'll talk about that in a minute. When you're all done, go down and hit cancel, and it'll take you back to the title screen. You can then choose to compete to track your high scores in each event. For now, let's go practice. Your skateboarder is then kicked to the curb. And the screen is this canted overhead look with 6 different skate options. You have freestyle, high jump, downhill jam, downhill race, joust, and a combination of all of them. This open area is nice to work on your freestyle flat ground. In all honesty, this is a good time to orient yourself to the wonky controls. Otherwise, you'll just be doing non-stop circles.
Alright, enough warming up. Time for the downhill race. But there's just one problem. This game has a huge learning curve. Just like real skateboarding, you're gonna get wrecked. Ah, come on. Nice. Damn it. Turn. Jesus. Alright, there we go. Ah, come on. Nice. Never mind. Jeez, these are everywhere. Nice. Come on. Turn. There we go. Come on, limp to the finish. Alright. It's just a matter of getting used to these ass-backward controls. Select the Goofy Foot stance. To accelerate, press up. To turn left, press right. To turn right, press left. You can perform an ollie by holding up, then pressing A, and duck by pressing down.
The goal of this event is to achieve the high score. This is done through points from tricks as well as the fastest run time. The overall score is depicted in the bottom right corner. While you may choose Goofy, your skateboarder still shows a regular stance.
You can do a 180 to make him look like he's riding Goofy, but the controls don't change. The manual includes instructions for D-pad inputs for both regular and Goofy foot. The D-pad inputs make sense from the perspective of the skateboarder going down the hill, but we're looking at it from the opposite direction, making it that much more confusing. If you biff it while riding Goofy, you go back to your regular stance. Once you crash, tap A as quick as you can to get up. Unfortunately, you have to build back up your momentum. Now let's check out the regular foot option. Your player keeps the same stance on his skateboard, but all the D-pad inputs are now inverted. It's a true nightmare. Everything's backwards. I end up compounding my mistakes, making them way worse. It's like playing Call of Duty your whole adult life, and then thinking you can switch right back to playing GoldenEye. It's not gonna work. The button layout is a mess. It feels like brushing your teeth with the wrong hand. Fortunately, you can rage quit at any time. By pressing start and select, it takes you back to the main menu. In addition to bombing down the hill, you can challenge yourself by olling over obstacles. You can even bust out rotations over the gaps. I was even able to pull off a 360, but it took several attempts. To perform the trick, hold A, then press up to start your ollie. Once airborne, begin your rotation by holding down left or right. It can be difficult to time when exactly to stop the rotation, as well as not landing on the grass. God, although frustrating, the animation's pretty hilarious, and I do enjoy those face plants. They look just like Marty McFly does in Back to the Future. Oh, there it is. What an awful game. About 50 tries later, I somehow pull it off. Yes! And it's even worth 10 times more points than a 180.
Excellent!
Once you feel like you've polished up your bag of tricks, head back to the skate shop, select the compete option, and bomb that hill like Christian Slater. Just gotta pick up some speed. Pressing the B button does nothing in this level. They should have used it for some kind of grab trick. So instead, all we can do is just grip it and rip it. The level does offer up a small variety of obstacles to gain bonus points from, but not much else. With no flip trick options to rack up points, it all comes down to speed.
Demon speed. Speed's what we need. We need greasy, fast speed.
Find shortcuts where you can to skinny down that overall time, and look at your character's reaction to the finish to see how well you did. When playing as a group, you'll automatically go to the next person in line. Everybody gets one shot for their best score. Once the last person's done, assuming your friends haven't fallen asleep or left the room already, they'll post your high scores, and these will be saved on the trophy room scores. Unfortunately, they get erased every time the power goes off. So unless you're a dedicated high scorekeeper, like George Costanza is to Frogger, your scores are going to go away each time you power off the console. What the game is lacking is having a pre-established high score to beat, kind of like Excitebike. In that game, they have a score you have to try to surpass as a way to challenge yourself. With nothing to strive toward, there's really no motivation. Okay, on to the next event. We're going to do high jump this time, and when I think of high jump, I'm thinking half pipe. And when I'm thinking half pipe, I'm thinking of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, right? When doing airborne tricks in Pro Skater, every consecutive landing garners you more and more speed. That is until you biff it. If you expect the same kind of high-flying action in Skater Die's high jump, you're going to be thoroughly disappointed. There's a vertical yardstick on the right-hand side to denote your height. That's all well and good if you can actually get out of the half pipe. There's only like 4 buttons on a Nintendo, and I'm pressing all of them in any combination I can think of, and somehow I'm going slower. This is embarrassing.
You embarrass me. You embarrass yourself.
Okay, fine, but the manual says you have to press the control pad and B button together, which means you have to tap the B button and tap the direction you're headed to gain speed. By doing this button smashing combination, you'll start to notice a little progress. Ooh, made it above the coping. Even when I press as fast as I can, I still only manage to get a few feet of air. You get 10 total passes. Oh, there's 4 feet and some change. Even with the best button smashing techniques, your airtime is a joke. It's time to bust out that childhood NES advantage, turn that shit up to 11, hold down the turbo button, and start wrecking house. Yes, it's cheating, but I'm 34 and I don't have the patience to master this. I see an immediate improvement on my airtime from the get-go, so take that, childhood frustration. Wow, nearly hit 9 feet. I think 10 foot is a max, but just like Ben Stiller, I'd have to be pretty high to get that.
I bet you would, Panama Red.
The effort put into this event is pretty minimal, with no danger of falling or chance to do any tricks. just mindlessly tapping buttons. One huge negative is the fact it doesn't capture your peak height over the 10 attempts. It instead only uses the 10th jump to count as your high score. My in score shows 8 feet 4 inches, but my actual best run was 8 feet 9 inches. Thanks, Obama. Back to the skate shop and time for the next challenge, Joust. But this ain't your daddy's joust, this is pool joust. What's pool joust? Well, it's overrated. Yeah, I would actually prefer your daddy's joust to pool joust. The game starts you off against 3 opponents from easiest to hardest. Let's go with Poser Pete. You start out as the guy in the blue pants, holding a giant Q-tip. You're given what looks like a joust from American Gladiators, except you're not battling each other head to head. Oh no, it's a game of survival, and you've got to be ready to play. The game alternates sides between offense and defense. Oh, come on! If you're the holder of the joust, simply press the A button to perform your strike at the precise moment he crosses your path. The key is to be on the same linear plane as your opponent in order to knock him down. Yeah, suck it, Trebek. Simply put, you gotta intercept your opponent on the same horizontal axis to dish out that punishment. But these head-on collisions seem impossible to avoid when you're the one on defense. And now I'm paralyzed. There's a little bit of vertical movement up or down, but not much. Nothing like the actual pool depiction. This awkward looking pseudo 3D pool is nothing more than a glorified halfpipe. In fact, the areas highlighted in yellow are totally off limits. What a farce. The level really squandered the potential of true pool skating against an opponent and should have ditched the joust for lip tricks, grinds, grabs, and 80s one-liners.
That was nice.
No, Christian. When playing against the computer, it's all about misdirection. While on offense, use the kick turn ability by pressing the right or left D-pad before reaching the top of the coping. This will make an abrupt 180 and throw off his rhythm. While on defense, you can avoid his attacks by initially pressing down as you drop in, then immediately tapping up to make a drastic course correction. All this joust action is reminiscent of the American Gladiator show from the 90s, which they also made a Nintendo game for. Damn, such a great show. This is only one of the 2 events in Skate or Die that has a 2-player simultaneous option. So toss out Double Dragon and Contra because we got Pool Joust. To actually win the match, you have to be the first person to score 3 points. You earn a point every time you knock down your opponent, but are only given 5 passes to make it happen. If the defender can survive, they're given 5 attempts, with the joust teleporting to their hands as they go on the offensive. The scoring is similar to tennis in that you have to beat your opponent by at least 2 points to achieve victory. Now time to scram before the homeowner arrives.
You're in trouble, kids. We have a homeowners association up here. I know my rights. You're gonna hear from us.
I'm just having fun, okay?
Let's go back to the skate shop, tighten those trucks, grab your pads, and hit the downhill jam.
Go through.
You start as player 1 on the left, rocking that bleach blonde mohawk. Just like the other levels, the objective is to gain the highest score by the end of the run. Points are accumulated through a combination of your runtime, crushing cans and bottles along the way, and successfully landing attacks against your opponent. Your character does a 180 every time they ollie, but this provides 0 points, even if it's over an obstacle. The controls are exactly the same as downhill race. Just remember to tap up after those tight turns to get your speed back, and to always go around the fences, as turning into Swiss cheese is brutal for your time. So even though Lester the computer beat me by a nose, I had the best overall score, thanks in part to my savage skateboarding attacks. But not nearly as savage as the one in the movie Kids. This one's not on Disney+. Attacks can only be performed in the direction your player's facing. This is where the 180 comes into play, to go toe-to-toe with your opponent. To punch, press the A button and the D-pad toward the opponent. Kicks are done by pressing in the opposite direction. The manual shows you can do a high, medium, or low kick by pressing the D-pad an additional time before your attack. 3 buttons for a basic attack? What is this, Karate Champ? Ain't nobody got time for that. Come on. You can earn 500 points if you land your attack while your opponent is airborne, giving them a vicious faceplant. Any self-inflicted crashes don't lose you any points, they just halt your momentum, allowing your opponent to increase his lead. Just like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, avoid falling into those open manholes. And don't forget to jump over that damn cop car. The fact that Downhill Jam is a 2-player simultaneous mode makes it rather enjoyable head-to-head against a friend. While beating the shit out of each other may be enjoyable, the best strategy is still for a quick runtime. Now if your opponent falls back too far, the game will automatically teleport them right up next to you. Never be tempted by those cans and bottles either. They're minimal points and you'll usually end up crashing for them. While editing this video, I realized that every time a player gets teleported forward, they incur a 5-second add-on penalty. In this run, Lester looks like he's right on my heels, but he's actually 20 seconds slower than my total time due to these penalties. I now realize that teleporting actually sucks.
No way!
One last thing out of curiosity. Has anyone ever been successful in choosing the path that looks like you're cutting through somebody's backyard? There's no ducking or crouch option in this level, and ollies don't seem to work either. It's ridiculous. The only person that could pull off getting through a backyard like this would be Ferris Bueller. God, you're really milking it, Broderick. Let's press on, head back to the skate shop, and proceed with the next event, which is freestyle. Unfortunately, the term freestyle is somewhat of a misnomer in today's parlance. For this game, it was actually talking about doing tricks in the halfpipe. What makes it freestyle is the game's claim that the tricks are up to your imagination. But in reality, you only have 7 different tricks to choose from, as seen in the manual. It also talks about the pump zone. To gain speed, you have to repeatedly tap the A button while you're in the center of the halfpipe, which they refer to as the pump zone. And you really gotta tap that A button in the pump zone to get those numbers up.
Pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
You can turn your axle stalls into grinds by pressing up or down once you're on the coping. It's satisfying to do, just don't go too far. Ah, shit. You can also crash just for holding your stalls or grabs too long, or when you don't stop your rotation just right so that the board lands parallel with the ramp on your way back in. Because the perspective on the near ground and foreground is so skewed, you can use the shade from your skateboard as a reference guide. If you see it disappear on the halfpipe, then expect to eat shit on the flat bottom. I gotta say, the crash animation is hilarious, so it keeps it entertaining as you pull your hair out. Time to get serious. For some reason, your character drops in on the side and never uses the roll-in. Once you begin, you have 10 passes to gather as much points as you can. Executing a variety of trick types will get you the biggest bonus at the end. Certain tricks, like the foot plant and hand plant, are determined by how fast you approach the coping. For any airborne tricks, pressing down on the D-pad will stop your player's momentum from going off the edge. There are no flip tricks, but you can do some gnarly rotations, and even do some tweaked out board grabs by holding A once you're airborne. Perfecting your trick selection and landing 10 for 10 was extremely difficult, but also equally rewarding when you actually pulled it off. It's a fair challenge that can be coming back for more. Easily the best well-rounded level, with plenty of replayability. Sometimes just trying to land one ridiculous trick was entertaining enough. Putting system performance to the test, it seemed that under the best circumstances, your player would be able to max out at a 720 rotation, so that's 2 full circles in the air. Keep in mind, this is a decade before Tony Hawk's infamous 900, so back then, 720 was king. Which is probably why they used the trick as a title for a separate skateboard game known as 720. A more open world game, 720 was actually released as an arcade a couple years before Skate or Die. It's a more fleshed out game, but I think its suburban setting and grade school protagonist was no match for the spunk and rebellious tone of Skate or Die. That being said, it makes you wonder where Skate or Die got the idea for its killer title. After some grueling trial and error, I figured out that a 720 over the rolling gap gave you an astounding 2,300 points. Yes! Nailed it! Which is the best single trick of this level. Awesome! Now that I've sharpened my vert and street skills, it's time to sign up for the last feature of the game, which is a consecutive competition of all 5 levels through a proper 80s montage.
Walk along the razor's edge. Don't look down.
Okay, slow down there, Pfeiffer. It's just a game. Alright everybody, that concludes my review of Skate or Die and Gleaming the Cube. First off, let's take a look at the game. After figuring out the controls and putting a few hours into it, I found the game fun, but it didn't feel complete. I felt like the levels were much too short, and there wasn't enough features to them. Plus, 2 of the 5 events were absolute garbage where you're just button smashing. The sound was great, so were the sound effects, and the animation wasn't too bad. I wish it would have put more time into the 2-player or the co-op mode to make it more enjoyable for your friends, because I doubt 8 people are going to sit around watching one person play at any given time. The game goes for about $5 today in 2020, and is very easy to find. Gleaming the Cube was a different story. Finding physical media for this was actually pretty difficult. I ended up having to get it on eBay for about 20 bucks, which is probably the cost of it back in 1999. Well, like I said in the review, if you're an adult for the first time watching it, you're not going to enjoy it. If you're a kid or an avid skateboarder, you'll have some fun with it. And if nothing else, you got Tony Hawk in it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, maybe learned something. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks.
Look, no one knows anything except a kid on a skateboard.